Hello everyone, welcome to Innovator Coffee, a podcast that bridges the gap between people and the world of AI and innovation. Follow us to explore the top AI applications, ecosystem insights, and the emerging trends.
In this podcast, Chris Yan, managing partner at Blitzscaling Venture, shares his career journey from leaving a stable job to funding companies, with his first successful exit coming 20 years later. He discusses raising funds during the pandemic, co-authored the New York Times bestseller book. He also gave the suggestions on the career development and the key insights for AI entrepreneurs, including the importance of funding winner takes most markets and building network effects. The conversation also covers investment strategies, international expansion, and what it takes to succeed in competitive markets. Finally, Yan offers perspectives on the future of AI and its impact on education. Enjoy.
Today we're honored to have Chris Yan, co-author of New York Times bestseller, The Aliens, and also the managing partner and founder of Blitzscaling Ventures. Welcome, Chris. Can you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me on. I'm delighted to be here. So as you heard, I am known primarily as a best-selling author of books like Blitzscaling and The Alliance. But I'm also a venture capitalist, and I spend a lot of time traveling around the world, sharing my ideas around startups, entrepreneurship, artificial intelligence, and other things like that. I was born in Santa Monica, California, in Southern California, went to school at Stanford University and then Harvard Business School. And for the past 30 years, I've been in the startup world. So I've been working with startups, working inside startups, founding startups, investing in startups, advising startups for the past 30 years.
Your background is very highly admirable. So my question is, being a New York Times bestseller author and also entrepreneur and a founding VC partner, you have so many roles. Could you please share us the three most memorable things you've been experienced in terms of career transition along the way?
Sure. There are a couple of things that really spring to mind. So, for example, one of the times that I was a CEO and entrepreneur was when I helped start a company called Ustream, which was a live streaming company. And this was actually something where I had to take a classic leap of faith. I was working as an executive at a software company. And when Ustream started to take off, I had to decide whether or not to leave my job, which paid me money every 2 weeks, to run a startup, which consumed my money and didn't pay me anything. And I ended up deciding to make the leap. And so we launched Ustream and built it up and ultimately sold it to IBM for $130 million. But, there was no guarantee that it was going to succeed. So it was a very big thing to take that leap of faith. Got into the startup world in 1995, and I did not have one of my companies successfully exit until 20 years later. I didn't think it would take that long, but it took quite a long time. And I had to keep the faith. I had to keep going. And the way I did that was because I was doing what I wanted to do. If I had just gotten into startups and entrepreneurship for the sake of making money, I would have quit a long time ago. But because I was doing it, because it was my purpose, it was my calling, it was something that I enjoyed, that gave me a sense of meaning in my life, I was able to persevere until I ultimately succeeded. That was one of those major transitions. Another major transition was when I got the chance to write my first book, The Alliance. So with The Alliance, it's in some ways a sequel to another book, The Startup Review, which my friends Reid Hoffman and Ben Casnocha wrote. And I helped them with that book. I gave them some ideas around how to structure it, and I'm in the book. And then after the book came out, they came to me and said, would you like to work with us on other books and be an author with us? And that was a big transition for me because, again, at that point in time, I was primarily the technology company executive and angel investor, and I hadn't been an author yet, even though I'd always enjoyed writing. And so I seized that opportunity, even though it meant that I had to work and write a book at the same time. It took a lot of energy and effort. I even had to stay up all night once or twice to make some deadlines for our publisher, but it was well worth it. And then the last major transition was after my second book, Blitzscaling, came out. I had the opportunity to start Blitzscaling Ventures. And this actually happened during the pandemic. So in many ways, you could argue it was a pandemic project. Everyone was at home, and I realized that if people were at home, The people who invest in venture capital funds still needed to do something with their time. And so I spent most of the pandemic on Zoom, raising money from people all over the world and launching Blitzscaling Ventures. So in each case, there was a very dramatic transition, a key decision point that I had to make. And in each case, it happened to work out. Now, there's plenty of other decisions I made over the years that did not work out, but those were ones that happened to work out.
In your first example, when you move from a stable salary to a venture journey, right?
Yes.
What inspired you to make that decision, or do you talk to any people who help you to make that decision?
So fortunately, at that point in time, there was already some good evidence that the company was working. It was taking off. We had great adoption and the numbers were moving in the right direction. And the person I had to speak with, of course, was my wife, because leaving a job where I make money and going to a startup where I'm financing it myself is a big transition and it has a major impact on the family. But she said, do you think that this is going to work? Is this something that you want to do? And if so, then we'll find a way to make it work. And so that's really the main person I consulted. Now, I consulted other people, advisors in my life and things like that. What do you think I should do? But the only one that really mattered was consulting my wife.
So you never think about, wow, I may not make money at the end, I may get a lot of failures.
Well, no, it's not a good feeling, right? That's why it's so stressful to be a CEO. You can think to yourself, well, the probability is this won't work because most startups don't work. And then at the end of it, I'll have gone without money. In fact, I'll lose money because I'll have invested money in this, and I'll have taken money from investors. I'll have lost that money as well. And then there's the people who decided to quit their jobs and join me in this because they believed in me, and then I'll have let them down as well. So it's enormously stressful to be an entrepreneur. But on the other hand, that's the only way to start a company.
You mentioned after 20 years, you have your first exit, right? That's a long journey. I think the majority of people, after they try like 1 to 3 years, they just stop and give up and go back to regular life.
Yeah.
People call. What makes you continue for like 20 years? How do you self-motivate it?
Part of it is simple desperation, because since I had not bought the house in 2000 like my wife wanted, I needed to get some liquidity events so we could buy the house. But beyond that, part of it was also pursuing entrepreneurship in a sustainable way. So if I spent the entire 20 years not making any money and just working on my own, trying to start a company, that probably would not have worked out. And by the way, my wife probably would not have been very happy about that. So I was pursuing entrepreneurship in a sustainable way. I started companies, I worked for companies, I made money in other ways along the way. I became an author. I did all these different things, and I was living a very happy life. I often jokingly said to a friend of mine, I have everything in life that money can't buy. The only problem is I don't have the money yet. And because I had the sustainable pace, which meant that I was still saving for retirement, still saving for the kids to go to college, still living a reasonable life, not just like eating ramen every day, it was possible to sustain that for 20 years. But I also needed the support of my wife, who could at any time have correctly pointed out, you could make 3 times as much money doing other things. Everyone in the world wants to hire you.
And also, the other details we want to know a little bit more is at the time when you transition from author to be a venture capitalist, right? What makes you think this is a good way you want to do in the future?
Well, a big part of this is, being an author is a pretty amazing job to have, if you can call it a job. You write these books and you get to travel around the world talking to people, and they pay you, and those are all wonderful, wonderful things. But the fact is that being an author, while it's an amazing job, does not give you the opportunity to make tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. Just does not. And being a venture capitalist does give you that opportunity. It's not guaranteed either, by the way. Venture capital is not necessarily a path to riches. It's also got its own risks, but there is greater potential upside in venture capital than in being an author, at least being the kind of author that I am. Maybe if I wrote about vampires or something, I could make more money as an author, but alas, the kind of author I am, I can only make so much. So becoming a venture capitalist was giving me a greater opportunity for upside. I could make potentially more cash as an author, just traveling around speaking, but I wanted the opportunity to actually help build companies that were worth billions of dollars, not just make thousands and thousands of dollars.
During the pandemic, you start to transition from an author to a VC. and you're like virtually talk to people and then you raise a fund. Kind of mystery happen. Like normally there are two things very hard to make it. One is put your sauce to people's brain. One is get money from other people's pocket. I think you did both at the same time.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit more about this part? Yeah.
Absolutely. And let me just also mention that, I had a lot of advantages when doing this. It wasn't just that I woke up one day and said, let me do this. All right, so I had done angel investing since 2006. So I had experience investing in startups, some of which then eventually were acquired or went public. So I had some track record there. I was working with other partners who also had a track record. One of my partners had been a VC for nearly 25 years at that point and had done very well in his career as well. So I wasn't raising money just saying, hey, I've never done this before, give me some money. I was saying, I've done this as an angel investor. My partner has done this as a VC for 25 years. And here is the system we're going to use to get into the best deals. And so that's how we were able to raise that money. I don't want it to make it seem like I just woke up one day and had the idea from scratch. But it was still a lot of work, but it reflected a fundamental understanding, which is in life, it's very easy to focus on your own point of view. And from my own point of view, it's like, oh my God, there's a pandemic. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to be alive in 6 months. Oh, woe is me. I can't believe this happened now. Right when I was about to start raising a venture fund, what am I going to do? And it's very easy to focus on the negatives. But what I said is, okay, let me look at it from a different point of view. All these people who are limited partners or potential investors, they're sitting at home and they would like to prove that they have a reason to have a job, right? An allocator of capital has got to allocate capital. They can't just sort of tell their bosses, well, there's a pandemic on, so, I guess we'll wait a year or two and then I'll start working again. Meanwhile, I'm going to watch a lot of Netflix. They can't do that. They got to start investing as well. And so I said, okay, if they are going to realize that they have to invest, I'm going to be there on their screen waiting to take their money. And that meant, spending a lot of time building out relationships, getting introductions and setting up these calls, doing 3, 4, 5 calls a day, which is a lot, right? Traditional fundraising, you wouldn't be able to do that because you'd have to go there physically. But here, I could start talking with people in Europe at the beginning of the day, talk with people in the United States in the middle of the day, talk with people in Asia at the end of the day. And so that's how I was able to actually do it.
If you can redo 3 things in your journey until now, what are they?
Well, there are a couple of pretty obvious ones, and I will relate them to you. First is that in 1999, I was invited to the launch party for Google. And I turned it down and didn't go because I thought, a company that's a search engine wasting money on a launch party, this company will be dead in 6 months. I really wish I'd gone and met Larry and Sergey and decided to join the company. That would be a great change in my life, probably making me far richer, especially because, like I said, that was their launch. They had like maybe 20, 30 employees at that point in time. The second thing is that many years later, the way I got to know my co-author, Reid Hoffman, is I met him when he was starting LinkedIn. And I loved the idea of LinkedIn. I was too poor at that point to be an angel investor in LinkedIn. But I wish I had borrowed money and somehow invested, or just quit my job and joined the company immediately. Again, that could have been just a tremendous, tremendous benefit to my life. And the final thing is something I credit to my wife. When we moved back to Silicon Valley from Boston in the year 2000, she said, we should buy a house. And I said, buy a house? Everyone's out of work. The housing prices are only going to go down. Who in their right mind would pay $800,000 for a house in Palo Alto? Needless to say, when I finally did buy that house in Palo Alto, it cost a lot more. So I really wish I'd listened to my wife back in 2000.
Now the price is like 2 to 3 million on average.
The minimum price is 3 million, and there are, the nice houses go for 4, 5, 6. It's insane.
Thank you for the information. Also, can you give us some details and quick introduction of your book, Blitzscaling? Are there methodologies suitable for today's AI entrepreneurs? Could you give some examples?
Absolutely. And this is really important for AI entrepreneurs. I think a lot of AI entrepreneurs are really focused on their technology, which makes sense because the technology is important. But the fact is the technology is changing all the time. And for example, many people have tried to build companies based on fine-tuning a particular model, only to discover that the general foundational models improve so much so quickly that their solution no longer leads the market within a couple of months. So that makes it very important as an entrepreneur to find not just a technological advantage, but a business model advantage. So the book Blitzscaling is all about how do you find a winner-take-most market, a market where things like network effects or the ability to secure market share and hold on to it allows you to be a long-term strategic winner, to have an advantage over all your competitors. And so as entrepreneurs, you should be trying to figure out, how do I build network effects into my product? How do I really deeply integrate what we do into what our customers do so they can never, ever possibly choose another vendor over us? Because that is what's going to allow you to build a sustainable business over time.
You mentioned that the resources and the speed are the key for doing entrepreneurship. And we can see now AI companies, like you said, face a competition from the giants, OpenAI's like model improvement and Google. How do you think a startup like us can find breakthroughs with our limited resources and establish unique competitive advantages?
So one of the things that is apparent about AI is that AI does not have a technology issue. AI continues to get more powerful all the time. AI has an adoption issue, because most companies, most businesses, most people are not using AI nearly as much as they could. And that's despite the fact that AI is almost free, right? There are so many products that are available for free, and even the paid products tend to be pretty inexpensive as well. So the opportunity lies not in developing greater technology, but in figuring out how to bring that value to a particular customer. If you're a B2C company, it's about bringing that value to the consumer. If you're a B2B company, it's about bringing that value to other businesses or to the enterprise. And your ability to figure out how to solve people's problems with this technology is more important than the technology itself, because the technology itself is already out there and these companies are not solving their problems with it. They need that help.
What are the most important elements when you make the startup evaluation before you do your investment? Yeah.
So broadly speaking, most investors are going to focus on a combination of the market, the product, and the team. And these are all really important. Different people have different ideas. Some people really focus purely on the market, other people focus purely on the product, other people focus purely on the team. Some combination of those things is going to be relevant. For Blitzscaling Ventures, we are really focused a lot on the market and the product. We're focused on the market because we're looking for that winner-take-most market. And we're focused on the product because we're looking for a product that has built-in things like network effects and virality. So those are the ones that really focus a lot. If we can find a company where it has a market that we think will be a winner-take-most market, where there's going to be one big winner that gets most of the money, and where we believe that the company's products have the virality and have the network effects to spread quickly and retain customers forever, those are the kinds of companies we want to invest in.
When we talk to different investors, we do heard a kind of like controversial opinion on how to evaluate the company. A lot of people told us that people is the most important one. Well, you have different opinion. Can you give us a little bit details why you look at things from this angle?
Absolutely. So the reason we do it, we still care about the people. It's just that's not the initial filter we apply, right? Because there's some people who really subscribe to the people theory and they say, oh, this person is so amazing, I'll back them whatever they do. And one of the great examples is a number of years ago, there was an entrepreneur who decided to own a grilled cheese restaurant called The Melt. And Sequoia liked that entrepreneur so much they backed him. I happen to believe that there's a limit to how much money you can make selling grilled cheese. So that's not the sort of thing that we would back. So what we want to do is we want to find those markets and find those products that we think are really valuable. And then from there, only invest in the ones where we think the team involved is great as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Is there any one company you want to share with us here as one example, or like an example in your book, which can prove your theory here?
Sure. So one of the companies that we invested in recently is a company called Crew AI. So it's a new AI deal. And what they are is an open source framework that helps enterprises manage multiple AI agents. So when they're using AI, they spin up multiple agents to take on the different roles and carry out the various tasks. And Crew AI is an open source framework that is used by a majority of the Fortune 500. It's growing incredibly rapidly. And we're very happy to be investors in the company. Now, the reason we invested in the company is we believe that they have the opportunity to establish themselves as the default standard for orchestrating AI agents, which we think is going to be really valuable. And when you establish yourself as a standard, you have platform network effects. Everyone starts to use you. The IT people become trained on your framework. They carry it to other companies. That helps it spread and build virality in. So it has the kind of characteristics we're looking for. And the fact that it's an open source product really helps spread the word. So the fact that it is an emerging standard and an open source platform with a lot of viral spread is why we decided to invest. But once we looked at the business and were interested, we met the founders and realized, oh my God, this is an incredible team as well. They've accomplished everything they've accomplished with a team of just 12 people. So they're enormously capital efficient and productive. So we really love what they've done.
So for most entrepreneurs, scaling from 1 to 1 billion often involves intense competition. What qualities do entrepreneurs need in order to stand out among a large numbers of similar competitors during the process?
So this is a great lead into the way that you actually met me originally, which is that I was teaching a storytelling workshop. And that's really a big part of it. In a world where people think the companies are all doing the same things, your ability to tell your company's story in a compelling way and distinguish it from the other companies becomes critical. Now, of course, as I also mentioned during my storytelling workshop, you need to make sure there actually are real differences, that it's not just a question of a different story, but that storytelling becomes critical when it's a crowded marketplace.
I have really strong feeling on this one because I remember one day when I talked to one entrepreneur, I think he has really good ability on the technology and their business models is really good. But when they talk to VC, right, I was sat on their side and they couldn't help VC understand what they try to resolve and what they have and they try to do. So it ends up they didn't get the fund. I think it's typical problem from the Asian entrepreneurs and they need to practice more.
No, of course, language can be a barrier. I think that it all depends. But as I've pointed out to many an audience over the years, the fact is many Americans don't speak particularly good English to begin with. It's more a question of your willingness to tell your story and tell it in a compelling way. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be grammatical, but it has to be compelling.
Do you want to give them some tips here? Maybe?
Absolutely. So when it comes to storytelling, the most important thing you have to think about is what it means for the audience that you're telling it to. Like, what is compelling to them? So when you think about a venture capitalist, you're trying to communicate to a venture capitalist. Are you trying to communicate that you have an amazing product? Are you trying to communicate that you're an amazing founder? Yeah, sure. It's good to communicate those things. But the main thing you want to communicate to them is investing in this company will make you a lot of money. And venture capitalists are all about trying to figure out what are the various risks that are involved. What's the market risk? Will there be a market for this product? What's the product risk? Does it work? Do people like it? What's the founder risk? Do you have the right skills involved? What's the competitive landscape? And so your goal in communicating with that venture capitalist is not to prove how great you are. It's to address those different risks and to make them feel confidence in you as the kind of person who can find risks, address them, and make the company successful so that they can make a lot of money investing in you. It's not about the degrees that you have or the previous experiences you have. It's making them believe that you are going to succeed this time.
Once a company reach a certain level of the stable income, actually, people are thinking about making the second curve. So according to your rich experience, the growth may hit a ceiling when it happens. How can the founder typically balance their energy between current business or the second curve development?
Yeah, so when you find that first curve topping out, and it may show up in slowdowns in revenue or may show down in slowdowns in user adoption or many other things, the most important thing is to realize, hey, you know what? This is not something that we can fix just by pouring more work into it. That's the tendency. People are like, oh, growth is slowing down. Work harder, work harder. No, you've got to recognize that sometimes the opportunity has reached its natural limit, in which case you need to focus on building out that second curve. To build out that second curve, you need to have a team of people who are just focused on that second curve. They can't be doing it in addition to the work that they're doing on the main business because they won't be able to focus on the new thing because there's always going to be something coming out of the main business that's clamoring for their attention. So if you are going to lead that project yourself, you have to be disciplined and make sure that you really are reducing dramatically the amount of time you spend on the existing business so that you can focus. And ideally, the people who are on the team, other than you, are purely focused on that new business and building that second curve.
From your book, do you have some examples you can share with people? Because sometimes when we
Absolutely.
talk about theory, right, they're like, oh, it's quite understandable, but it's hard to adopt it in their situation.
Yeah, so one of the great examples of this is Amazon Web Services. So Amazon Web Services is something that came out, it's almost 20 years old now, if you can believe that. There were a couple of engineers at Amazon who thought, we have to do all this work with service-oriented architectures in order to make things work within Amazon. We have so many different departments and different organizations. What if we open it up and made it available to people outside of Amazon? And that was something where, it took a while for that idea to take root. It was not something that Jeff Bezos had come up with. But when they presented it to Jeff Bezos, Jeff said, actually, I think this is something interesting. And he backed it. And what he did was he created a separate unit to work on it. And he dedicated those people to it full time. And then he defended that from the board, from various people who thought that it was a waste of money and a waste of time. In fact, when Amazon Web Services was announced, many Wall Street analysts said this is a distraction from the main business of selling books and other goods. Why is the company doing this? And so this is a great example of how having that separate group of people focused on something that seems almost completely different can actually build something tremendously of value, because Amazon derives so much of its value now from Amazon Web Services. It's probably the single most important component of the business.
Also, for startups from 0 to 1 to 100 and 100 to 1 billion, are there any similarities and differences in terms of company structure, employees, and management team requirements?
Yes, so you're referring to one of the things we talk about in Blitzscaling, which is the fact that companies go through stages of growth. And each time the company increases an order of magnitude in size, it's really changing a great deal. So the processes, the rules, the way you relate to each other at 10 employees is completely different from at 100 employees. It's completely different once you get to 1,000 employees. And so the most important thing to know is that in general, you're moving from less formal to more formal. So you go from informal ways of working together to very formal ways with more rules, more kinds of processes, and more layers of management. And also, what you are always doing is you're moving from smaller to bigger. And so your concerns are changing. As a founder, when you're small, all you have to do is talk with the individual people in your organization. But as your company gets bigger and bigger, you need to communicate to everyone in the organization. You need to start doing things like, all hands meetings and emails and doing things that convey your vision to the entire company rather than just to the people that you speak with one-on-one.
We do have some audiences that try to locate their job in different stages of the companies. So from this perspective, what are the characteristics different stage of company are looking for? Absolutely.
So let's say that you're the kind of person who really loves figuring things out. You want to figure out something new. You want to learn about a new area. You want to experiment. You feel very comfortable doing things yourself, even when there's no playbook. That means that you're great at working at those early stages of a startup, when everyone has to be open and flexible to doing just about anything, because the world around you is constantly changing. On the other hand, you're a person who feels most comfortable in a formal setting with very clear guidelines and rules, and where you get a chance to really hone your skills in a particular area. Then you're probably looking at working at a company at a later stage, because that's where people have figured out more of the parameters of the business, and there's a greater degree of optimization that occurs rather than experimentation.
Is there any stage have a faster path compared to other stage?
Well, typically, it's the earliest stages that give you those opportunities to grow so quickly, right? If you think about it, a 19-year-old Mark Zuckerberg could not get a job as CEO of a company unless he started it himself. And we're talking about people who were, friends of his from undergrad and what have you, that are now amongst the most powerful people in the world. So having the ability to really be there at the beginning and let the company's exponential growth carry you along with it. That's the most interesting opportunity.
In your eyes, what will we expect to see about AI in this year?
So I think that, again, it's always dangerous to make predictions, especially about the future. But what I think we will see is broader adoption of AI. And one of the things that will drive it is the presence of AI agents, including on the consumer side. I think that consumers could be using AI for so many things, but typically don't. And I think they're waiting for those multimodal agents that could basically act like a genie, where you can say, hey, can you do this for me? And it will go out there and do it. I think that's going to drive greater adoption. So in other words, I'm betting on human laziness.
How do you feel about the recent innovation areas of AI field? We're talking about multimodal, edge AI, and agent, and all other things. So how do you feel like that? Are there certain areas that are more suitable for like a Blitzscaling strategy?
I think that they're all important because of the adoption problem that I described. So multimodal is so important because it makes it easier for people to adopt and get value out of AI. So for example, one of the things I did was I was assembling a sauna that we bought, and I couldn't figure out how to open an outdoor outlet. And so I took a photo and sent it to ChatGPT and said, tell me how to open this. It came back with a set of instructions and I followed them and I opened it. Now that's not something where I could easily do it just with text. I couldn't say, I am looking at an outdoor outlet. Here's the serial number. This just takes forever to do. Just take the photograph and say, how do I do this? So that multimodal is going to be very important. It's not just the visual, it's also the auditory. I happen to believe that the audio interface is going to be very important because it's hands-free and it's something that most people feel comfortable with. In fact, as we know with computers and many other things, people feel more comfortable with their voice than with typing or working other interfaces. So I think that element is going to be really critical. And then, of course, the reason I think the AI agents are going to be so important is because of their ability to drive productivity, to carry out the tasks that people don't want to carry out or are not well suited to. I actually gave the folks at Create AI a saying. I said, what you want to tell people is that you make AI that they love to handle the jobs that they hate.
We recently talked about this. Does the AI try to replace people or try to help people, right? I think you're definitely at the helping people side.
But there's no question there's some replacement because we are using human beings as robots in some cases, mental robots, trying to do things that are really boring and tedious and better done by AI. But hopefully those people will be redeployed into areas where their human brains can be more effective.
Nowadays, the world is small. In global expansion, does the Blitzscaling approach need to be adjusted? What advice do you have for startups expanding their business internationally?
So, of course, Blitzscaling really is something that depends heavily on the context. And so the particular market you're in will tell you how fast you need to go. The goal is to move faster than the competition. There's not a specific target for the speed at which you need to grow. It's mainly, are you growing faster than the competition and achieving market leadership? So in an environment where it's more difficult to raise money, then you may not have to grow as quickly. But in an environment where people are very excited, like in the field of AI, you need to move very quickly because somebody else is going to be willing to take money and grow themselves.
Also, at the early stage, do you recommend people go international early or one location and grow fast first?
So it depends a lot on how much work it is. So overall, the most important thing is to win a market. And so if the market is divided up geographically and you need to win each individual market, then my general advice is to win the market first before you expand to the next market. However, in a situation where you believe it's relatively easy to expand from one place to another, and where other people have realized that there's an attractive business out there, you need to grow as quickly as possible. In the book, we talk about Airbnb, and Airbnb obviously found a great model that has proven to be a great business. But they faced competition in Europe from a company called Vimdu that had been funded by Rocket Internet. They had to grow internationally long before they finished winning the US market because they couldn't afford to let someone else win the Europe market before they did.
The ability to leverage data networks for expansion we mentioned is considered a key competitive advantage, also for AI products. So how do you think about AI companies in the early stages can balance the tension between gather more data or scaling quickly?
So I think that the two go together, right? You scale quickly to give yourself the chance to gather more data. I don't think that you can make a choice between the two. Now, if you are somehow forced to make a choice, then the question becomes, which is delivering greater competitive advantage? Gathering more data or expanding the number of users? And you should be able to estimate for yourself which one is more important. And by the way, maybe that, there's a mix, right? You need to get the user growth just to this amount and then it stops being so important. Or maybe you need to get the data to this point and it crosses a phase change threshold or something like that. There can be complexity there.
What progress do you predict AI will make in the next 1 year and 10 years?
So the next 1 year is pretty straightforward. More modalities, greater efficiency. 10 years, goodness only knows where we'll be in 10 years. I think we'll necessarily have achieved true artificial intelligence with self-willed machines that act on their own, that are indistinguishable from human beings, or perhaps are even super intelligent. I don't think so. It could happen. I'm not going to say it won't, but I can't extrapolate from current trends and get there. On the other hand, what I do think is highly likely is at that point in time, there will be brand new approaches to AI that will also be providing us with huge value. If we think about the business models that existed at the beginning of the internet boom and then what existed 10 years later, those are totally different. At the beginning, you have ISPs and the first signs of e-commerce and directories. And then 10 years later, you have Facebook and LinkedIn. You have all these different models that are totally different than what came before. So I think we're going to continue to see business models evolve. I think we're going to continue to see products evolve. And the things that are top of mind 10 years from now will be totally different from what's top of mind today.
What are the most interesting, significant, innovative, or your favorite AI product you see most recently?
How do I do it so I'm not just promoting my own portfolio? That's the tricky part. I would say that the general class of AI products that I'm most interested in are the ones that enable human creativity. So whether it's helping more people, be able to create comic strips or manga, or ultimately short films eventually, music, all of these things I think are tremendously exciting because it's so rewarding and fulfilling to create, and most people feel that they can't. And if AI can put that in reach of more people, I think that's a great thing. I don't know if ultimately we'll make a lot of money because guess what? If everyone is creating stuff, it's going to be like all the people who are creating it right now. Some will be good, some will be bad. It won't necessarily mean that everything's great. I think that giving people the ability to feel the power of creation is going to be tremendously positive for society.
Do you have any other books or suggestions that inspire you and you would like to recommend to our audience for AI?
I will point out that this book up here that my friend Reid Hoffman wrote that I helped him with along the way. And this is from 2023, and it's a look at the future, trying to project how AI will make the future better and how it will amplify our actual human capabilities. There's also another book that Reid has coming out that I helped with a little bit, although my friend Greg Beato is the one who really wrote it along with Reid, and it's called Super Agency, and that will be coming out this month. As a matter of fact, the book will be launching, so that'll be very exciting. I've already read it. It's got a lot of amazing stories in it, and I think that it'll be a big success. One more thing that I will say, even though it's not AI specific, I have a copy of it here. My friend Ed Catmull, the founder of Pixar, wrote this book, Creativity Inc., about his experiences there that I still think is just a phenomenal book that every person who's a leader should read and understand, because we are all managing creative workforces now.
What is a question you think we should ask but we hasn't been?
First of all, that's always my favorite question. What question should I have asked but didn't? And my answer in this case is, Chris, what is something that you believe, that you know, that most people don't, that you think they should be aware of? I think that one of the things that is so funny about this world we live in now, people are always trying to figure out, oh, what's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? What should I do? And the fact is, science has already worked this out. So there's an entire field of practice called positive psychology, where scientists have researched what actually makes humans fulfilled and thrive. And I encourage people to go look it up. I would just summarize it by saying the most important things that we should all do in our lives are to make sure that A, we feel like that we are growing, we are making progress, we are becoming better, we are becoming greater than we were before. The second thing is we want to prioritize spending time with people we care about. Far too often, people have these other priorities: make money, get a promotion, and they spend time with people they don't care about, and they miss the people that they do, whether it's family, friends, or what have you. So the most important thing is the time you spend with others, and are you spending time with people you want to spend time with? And the final thing is that one of the best ways to feel happiness and satisfaction is to give to others, to help others. Wiki, you happen to see me teaching my storytelling workshop. I don't get paid for teaching that workshop. I take time out of my day to do that. But I do it because it gives me a great sense of satisfaction to help the students in the workshop. And that's why I do it year after year. And I do these things not just because I want to be a good person, though I do, but because they help make me happy. And I think that the more people do these kinds of things, the happier they will feel. I think that helping other people realize their dreams is enormously satisfying. Of course, hopefully you realize your own dreams. But when you have realized your own dreams, helping other people realize their dreams is great. I've gotten a chance to realize my own dreams. I dreamed that one day I'd be a best-selling author. I dreamed that one day I'd be able to share my story with people from all over the world. And I've gotten pretty much everything I looked for in life. And so now what I want to do is help other people achieve their dreams. Way back when, even before my friends wrote The Startup of You, which talks about personal mission statements, I had already decided on my personal mission statement, which is that I help interesting people do interesting things. What it means is that I have a sense fundamentally of curiosity. I like to see things that are interesting. Usually that means things that are new, although there could be old things that are interesting as well. And I want to help people, right? I don't want to just be a consumer of the future. I want to help shape it and help the people who are making a better future bring it to reality.
Yeah, I have additional questions. Talking about this AI age, we are thinking about how to educate our next generations. Do you have some kind of inputs on this? In this area, how can we better educate the generations?
So I think that the most important thing is to give them access to these tools, but also to help them work with the tools, right? There is this notion that is, oh, let's keep it away from them. Let's make sure that the children aren't using AI. They'll become dependent on it and they won't be able to think for themselves. I think that's foolish, because if they're going to be using AI in their lives after they finish school, keeping it from them seems like insanity. But on the other hand, the idea that AI is just inherently good and you just put it in people's hands and magic happens is also crazy, right? AI is something that people need guidance on. And it's something that there's still a major role for teachers, for mentors, for peers, for other people to help people figure out how to use AI. Because if we just leave people alone with the AI may lead them down a rabbit hole. We know that AI does not necessarily have its own moral compass. That's what human beings are for. So we still need to have humans in the loop when it comes to teaching AI.
I know a lot of people get to a certain stage, they start to become very stable. They don't want to try something new, or they're afraid to try something new. Right? Is there any tips you can give us to help build up the mindset, prepare the inner side to be ready to try something new?
It's very true. And this is something I realized even before I turned 30, because I worked with people who were, not as old as I am now, but were older than me then. It was amazing how set in their ways they were, right? We were organizing an event, and I said, we have to come up with some music. I asked my intern, who was younger, to come up with some music to play. And this venture capitalist who was helping with this said, well, just as long as it's none of that rap music, that bip, bap, bip, bap, bip, bap. I'm like, my God, you sound like you're 85, not 45. What's wrong with you? And so a big part of what I think helps you with this is to actually follow what's happening in the world, following the trends that young people are following, even if they don't make sense to you. Right. So I'm not a fan necessarily of Jake and Logan Paul, but I know who they are. I'm not an obsessive watcher of Mr. Beast's videos, but I know who he is and how he works. I really can't sing any song by Chappell Roan, but I know that Chappell Roan exists. And of course, I've been a fan of Taylor Swift for a long time. So the whole point is you're taking in all this information, not just about about the startup world and advances in technology, but also about what matters to people all over the world. What are the things that are coming into play? And instead of saying, oh, it was so much better in my day, conveniently enough, most people always believe the greatest music was made when they were teenagers. Guess why? Because that's what they learned to love when they were growing up, and then they never turned the page. And so take in information from a variety of sources. Talk to people who are younger than you, who have very different interests. Seek out as much of this information as possible so you can see just how varied the world can be, and how whatever you do and believe now may be great, but it's certainly not the entire world, and you should always be open to the possibility that something better may come along. For the members of the podcast, I want to commend them for listening. It's very easy to go through life and just do your work and just try to get good grades or try to get good performance reviews. But listening to a podcast like this, trying to educate yourself, trying to find new perspectives and bring them into your life proactively, that's one of the most important things you can do. That's how you will stand out in your workplace with the people you work with. If you bring in new insights, if you bring new ways of looking at things, if you're able to achieve more and help them achieve their dreams, then people are always going to want to work with you. It was a delight to be here. A lot of great questions. And thank you guys for having the patience to listen to my answers.